Hello and welcome to another history revision video. Today we're going to focus on paper 3 and we're going to look at the lean years of the Nazi Party. When we're studying the growth of the Nazi Party, it really helps to divide the period into 3 phases. Firstly, we have the early years. This is when Hitler first took control of the party. Next we have the lean years. These are the years where the party really wasn't very successful. And lastly, we have the years when the Nazis finally won power. Now in this video, we're going to focus on the lean years, but there are videos covering both the other 2 phases on the channel. Let's start by looking at the first key event of the lean years, the Munich Putsch. This was the first attempt by the Nazis to seize power using force in November 1923. The Nazis launched their putsch in Bavaria, southern Germany. Their plan was to seize power in Munich first, and then march to Berlin and topple the Weimar government. Hitler hoped to win the support of key members of the Bavarian government, von Kahr, von Seisser, von Lossow. He had already struck up a friendship with the respected war hero, General Ludendorff. So why did Hitler launch the putsch in November 1923? Let's look at the main causes and their consequences. Firstly, Hitler had worked hard to shape and develop the party in its early years. As a result, the party membership had grown to about 50,000 people. This support was concentrated in Bavaria, so Hitler believed that launching his putsch there would succeed. Hitler was also aware of recent events in Italy, where the politician Mussolini had seized power by marching to the capital city, Rome. This is where Hitler got the idea for his putsch from. He hoped to copy Mussolini's tactics. Another factor which contributed to Hitler's putsch was his friendship with Ludendorff. This made the party look more impressive and respectable. As a war hero, Ludendorff had a lot of influence, especially over the army. With Ludendorff by his side, Hitler hoped that the army would support his putsch. The crises of 1923 triggered the putsch. In this year, the French marched into the Ruhr and occupied it. Hyperinflation really took off, wiping out people's savings. To get control of the hyperinflation, Stresemann told workers in the Ruhr to go back to work for the French. This was yet another humiliation for the Weimar Republic, on top of the harsh Treaty of Versailles. Now, as the Weimar government's popularity crashed, Hitler believed that the people would join him and support his putsch. All the action of the putsch took place on the 8th and 9th of November. On the evening of the 8th, the Nazis and their stormtroopers marched into the beer hall where the Bavarian politicians were meeting. Von Kahr, von Seisser and von Lossow were held at gunpoint and forced to support the putsch. Under pressure, they agreed. However, Ludendorff later sent them home for the night, which gave them an opportunity to warn the authorities about what the Nazis were planning. The following day, Hitler hesitated, unsure of whether the putsch would succeed. At midday, the Nazis marched towards the centre of Munich, where the armed forces were already waiting for them. Both sides opened fire, and in the chaos that followed, 16 Nazis were killed. Hitler himself was injured. Röhm, Ludendorff, and later Hitler himself were all arrested. So what went wrong with the putsch? Why did it all fail? Here we could identify 3 big factors. Firstly, the mistakes of the leaders themselves. Ludendorff released von Kahr and von Seisser, allowing them to warn the authorities. Röhm's men did not capture the army barracks that night, which meant that the soldiers and the weapons in the city were not under Nazi control. Hitler's hesitation on the day of the putsch also gave the army time to prepare. Secondly, the putsch itself had weaknesses. The Nazis only had a small force and very few rifles. And Hitler was wrong about local citizens joining the putsch. As a result, the Nazis were well outnumbered and outgunned by the professional army. Finally, the putsch faced strong opposition. Even though Hitler had Ludendorff's support, the army did not switch sides. It stayed loyal to the Weimar Republic. It was ready and waiting when the Nazis arrived, and it was ruthless in dealing with the putsch, opening fire on the marchers. Now, before we go any further, you might want to think about these two things. Firstly, can you see any connections between these three factors? And secondly, how would you rank these three factors in order of importance? Let's think about the consequences of the putsch now. The headline here is that in the short term, the putsch was a failure, but over the longer term, the putsch had some very positive results for the Nazis. In the short term, the putsch failed to achieve its goal of overthrowing the Weimar Republic, and 16 Nazis lost their lives. However, the Nazis were able to use this as proof of their bravery and commitment. The violence on that day proved that the Nazis were willing to take action, and that made them stand out from other right-wing nationalist parties who only talked about removing the government. The 16 dead Nazis became martyrs, and they were used in propaganda to recruit new members to the party. The leaders of the putsch were put on trial, but this played into Hitler's hands. Hitler used his skills as a speaker to deliver powerful speeches in the courtroom, which were printed in the newspapers afterwards. Now, this helped to establish his reputation as the leading right-wing politician in Germany. Before the trial, he was hardly known outside Bavaria. After the trial, he was a household name across Germany. Hitler was found guilty and imprisoned. However, the judge was particularly lenient on him, giving him the minimum sentence possible, just 5 years, of which he served only 8 months. This leniency from the judge encouraged sympathy for Hitler. The judge's decision gave a clear message. What Hitler had done was legally wrong according to the Constitution, but morally his actions were understandable. While he was in prison, the party was not well led by Rosenberg. Splits developed between the northern members who preferred the party's socialist agenda and the southern members who liked the nationalist policies. The party began to lose its way and it performed badly in elections. However, time in prison gave Hitler a chance to reconsider his methods. He dropped the idea of seizing power by force, and he switched to the idea of winning power through elections. Now, this was a key turning point in the party's tactics. During imprisonment, Hitler also had the time to write his vision for Germany in the book Mein Kampf, or My Struggle. We'll look at that more in a second. After Hitler was released, he reorganised the party. There are 3 main aspects to this. Firstly, his book Mein Kampf. Now, this summarised all his main ideas in one place, including his ideas about race, his nationalist ideas about conquering an empire in the East called Lebensraum, his conservative values, for example, on the role of women and culture, socialist ideas about using profits to benefit all, and this was particularly appealing to workers. And he also spelled out his vision for a totalitarian government. In other words, democracy would be replaced by a single, all-powerful dictator. The book really mattered because for the first time it set out a clear vision for the party. And with all the publicity of the trial, the book became a bestseller. It reached a wide audience across Germany. now Germans nationwide understood exactly what the party stood for. Secondly, Hitler reorganised the party nationally. Up until this point, the party was limited to just Bavaria. But now Hitler set up branches across the country. Each branch was led by a Gauleiter. The party also set up a new headquarters in Munich with a new secretary and treasurer to manage the finances. It also set up sections for women and for youth. Now, these local branches really mattered because they were used to run election campaigns for the Nazis in every region. The improvements to the organisation of the party also made the party look professional, and that attracted support and money from wealthy industrialists like Bosch and Krupp. That money was really important for funding Nazi campaigns. Lastly, let's look at the Bamberg Conference in 1926. Hitler held the conference in Bamberg, southern Germany. It was his attempt to end the splits within the party. Hitler prioritised the party's nationalist ideas, but he was opposed by members like Goebbels and Strasser, who preferred the socialist parties about sharing out wealth and land. Hitler won the debate by accusing the socialist wing of being too much like the communists, and thus discrediting them. Now, the conference really mattered because it ended the splits in the party. Both Goebbels and Strasser pledged their loyalty to Hitler, and they were rewarded for this. Goebbels, for example, was made Gauleiter of Berlin. The conference also settled the future direction of the party, making it clear that the party would prioritise its nationalist policies about restoring Germany's empire and greatness. It also strengthened Hitler's position as leader. By the time the conference ended, it set a clear principle. Hitler's orders were the final word. This was his party, and his leadership was not to be challenged. So, did all these improvements work? Well, here are the results of the May 1928 elections. As you can see, the Nazis trailed in 7th place. They won just a small handful of seats. So, the reorganisation of the party did not lead to any immediate success in elections, and this is why we call the period the lean years. So what stopped the newly reorganised Nazi party from gaining support? Well, there were 3 factors which worked against the Nazis in the late 1920s. Firstly, Stresemann's economic policies were creating an economic boom. Living standards were improving, Germans felt more contented, so they were voting for moderate parties who supported democracy. Secondly, Stresemann had worked hard to improve Germany's position abroad. He seemed to be getting back Germany's position as a respected power in the world, and that also satisfied Germans, which increased their support for the Republic. Finally, don't forget that Hindenburg was elected president in 1925. He was another respected war hero. Having him as president helped to win support from the middle classes for the Weimar Republic. Now, the headline here is that as long as the Weimar Republic was doing well, support for moderate parties remained high, and the Nazis found it difficult to make a breakthrough in elections. If you would like to take this further, here are 2 questions you could have a go at using your notes from the video. Thanks for watching. If the tutorial was helpful, then don't forget to like the video. There are videos covering the rest of the Germany content on our YouTube channel, as well as some paper 3 exam technique. And remember, Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already become one of our followers.